maybe a phase one, which would include, obviously, the arguments from the prosecution, arguments from the defense, and then a period of written questions, because remember, senators are not allowed to speak during the impeachment trial. So basically written questions submitted to either the prosecution or the defense through the Chief Justice. At that point, during the Clinton trial, the issue of the appropriateness of calling witnesses was addressed. Obviously, that is the most contentious part of one of these proceedings, and that'll be addressed at that time and not before the trial begins. With regard to getting the papers, it is a rule of impeachment in the Senate that we must receive the papers. It continues to be my hope that the Speaker will send them on over. The House argued that this was an emergency. They needed to act quickly, that the President was such, apparently, from their point of view, such a danger to the country that they needed to really rush this through. And then they sat on the papers now for 3 weeks. I hope that'll end this week. I understand there's considerable discomfort among Senate Democrats, some of them expressing that to some of you, over the continued delay in sending it on over. I wanted to touch on a couple of other things. There was some discussion in the last few days related to the Iraq episode that we're experiencing now, about the appropriateness of targets. I want to associate myself with the Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of State with regard to the appropriateness of cultural sites being targeted. That is not appropriate. As many of you have already written, and I've been pretty open about it, courting the Secretary of State to run for the U.S. Senate. He's made a decision that I think clearly under the circumstances is best for the country to continue to serve in that role. I think clearly under these circumstances he made the right decision. That should not, however, lead to any excess observations on the part of the other side that Kansas, which hasn't elected a Democratic senator since 1932, will do it in 2020.
We are all looking forward tomorrow to hearing from the administration about the situation in the Middle East, Iraq, and Iran. And I think that it's fair to say that, irrespective of what people think about the geopolitics and some of the decisions and discussions there, that Soleimani was somebody who needed to be eliminated. And I make no mistake about it. He was a terrorist. He was responsible for killing hundreds of Americans and for terrorizing that region of the world for many, many years. And so we're anxious to hear about what the administration's process was in terms of that decision, and to hear about what perhaps may come next. With respect to impeachment, as the leader pointed out, the Senate is ready to do its job. We're just waiting for the House to send the articles, and I think the fact that they haven't says that this process is all about the politics of their base. What you're seeing Speaker Pelosi and Chuck Schumer do right now, I think, is basically play to their base and play political games. If there was such a sense of urgency surrounding this, obviously they would have sent it over here by now. But when they do, as the leader pointed out, Republicans are prepared to take it up and to follow the precedent that was set during the Clinton impeachment, which I think is a very fair process, which allows both sides to have their day in court, to make their arguments, for senators to ask questions, and then for any additional information to be voted upon. So I look forward to moving forward with that process, assuming again that the House decides to put aside the politics and to proceed with this process in a way that I think treats the President in a fair way and allows something that he didn't get from the House of Representatives, and that is a fair opportunity to defend himself.
Following up with what the leader has said with regard to impeachment, the Speaker of the House really has no role or leverage in impeachment in the Senate. What she has been doing over the last 3 weeks is completely partisan, all political, and as was just announced, we do have the 51 votes necessary to move forward using the Clinton model for impeachment. And the public is clearly with us in our positions there. Poll out this past weekend, a Harvard-Harris poll, 53% of Americans say that what Speaker Pelosi is doing is a political stunt. 56% say she's gone beyond her constitutional boundaries. 58% say send the articles. And 77% of Americans say accept the Clinton rules. That's where we are. 58% send the articles, national numbers, 77% accept the Clinton rules. Look, there's lots going on in the world. The world continues to be a dangerous place. There's important business that this Senate and this House need to do. We need to get on these things. It's time for Speaker Pelosi to get on with it or get out of the way.
Well, economic numbers have not been this good for a long time and may have never been any better for working families. The report at the end of the year that wage earners, the bottom 25% of wage earners in America, had the biggest increase in pay last year of any group and the biggest annual increase in a long time, something almost at the level of 5%. The top 25% of wage earners had pay increase a little less than 3%. So we're seeing the economy begin to equalize a little bit, a demanding workforce, paying the wages that people need to have to work in this kind of economy where people are having more vacancies than people looking for jobs. Unemployment, the lowest it's been in 50 years, and all the other economic indicators from the stock market to consumer confidence to holiday spending, all good, dramatically better than just a year ago, and even more dramatically better than 5 years ago. People need to be feeling good about the economy. Their spending habits, their investing habits seem to indicate that they are feeling good about the economy. It's easy to let that good news not be talked about at a time when we're focused on so many other things. But if you're a family at your kitchen table and you see this situation compared to the one you were in 2 or 3 years ago, you understand you're in a much better economy and your family is in a much better place.
Happy New Year, everybody. It's exciting to see the transition from 2019 on into 2020, and we certainly will have an exciting year. And over the holidays, while I was back home, people are excited about the new year and the fact that we do have a fresh start. And as I look at Congress with that fresh start, what we need to understand is we still have a lot of work to do for our constituents, the American people. And so we have had no delay. I am happy to report that things that matter to Iowans and Americans are already happening here in the Senate. This morning, our senior senator from Iowa and the chairman of the Finance Committee passed out of his committee the USMCA. This means a lot to folks back home. It means a lot to people all across the United States. And we are acting on it immediately. We're excited about that. We're also really excited that we now have a Phase 1 China deal, which hopefully will be signed next week. So while everybody is so focused on impeachment here, folks back home are telling me they are fed up. They want us to work on things that really matter to them. And that's what we're doing here in the Senate. I know the tides will turn maybe soon, maybe not. We don't know. Depends on Speaker Pelosi. But we are excited about the new year. 2020 is going to bring good things. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon and Happy New Year. There is indeed all sort of political argument going on right now, and I suppose that's understandable, but let that not obscure all the accomplishments that this Republican-controlled United States Senate has achieved over the last year or so. We've been able to sustain the longest period of economic expansion in American history. Wages are rising. We have gotten a lot of faithful constitutionalists, a record number, onto the federal bench. We've come to an agreement on USMCA. We've gotten a full repeal of the medical device tax, and we've given our troops the largest pay increase in a decade. And we're not done yet. That's what I want to emphasize. Hoosiers, like so many other Americans, want us to get substantive work done on the back end of some of the important near-term things we're dealing with. So my priorities moving forward are going to be to deal with lowering health care costs, making sure that housing is more affordable for rank-and-file Americans, that higher education is accessible to all Americans, that we actually pass that USMCA agreement that we've come to terms on. We made a great first step today in the Senate Finance Committee, and I was proud to cast my affirmative vote for that. And of course, we always want to keep the American people safe and secure, our most fundamental responsibilities. So these will be my priorities moving forward. I know that Republicans in the Senate are committed to getting the work of the American people done. Thanks so much.
Leader McConnell. Leader McConnell.
Yeah, let me just add one more thing before going to questions. The other day, I noticed some of the Gang of Eight complaining about not having prior notice of the strike. Let me remind everybody, I've been in the Gang of Eight during the Obama years. When Osama bin Laden was taken out, I was not told in advance. I was called by the vice president afterwards. My reaction to it was, congratulations, you did the right thing. And as Joe Lieberman pointed out in the Wall Street Journal yesterday, where's the applause? Where is the applause on the other side for the demise of one of the most heinous killers who ever stalked the earth? This guy was the worst of the worst. Where is the bipartisan applause for eliminating this threat? It's mind-boggling, and I do think it's interesting to compare the reaction to this, because there's a different occupant of the White House, to the reaction all the rest of us had when President Obama carried out an action very similar.
Leader
Yeah.
McConnell, thank you. Good afternoon. You talk about the Clinton arrangement, 100 to nothing. Isn't that the point, though, that something as important as impeachment, that all 100 senators agreed to something? You're suggesting here that you would implement something with 52, 53 votes, leaving the Democrats out in the cold here. Isn't that the idea that the Daschle lot agreement in 1999 got all 100 senators on the same page, and if you're going to go down the road of impeachment trial, that effort should be made in advance?
Well, I think I answered the question. That was,
But that's the idea.
well, that was impossible because they refused to treat President Trump the same way we treated President Clinton. What was good enough for President Clinton in an impeachment trial should have been good enough for President Trump. And all we're doing here is saying we're going to get started in exactly the same way that 100 senators agreed to 20 years ago. What's good for President Clinton is good for President Trump. We'll get around to the discussion of witnesses. We got around to the discussion of witnesses after we got through phase 1 20 years ago.
Senate Resolution 16 in 1999 had a provision for a motion to dismiss and motions on witnesses. Will that be included in the organizing resolution as it was in 99?
We're going to have a similar resolution. It may not be word for word exactly the same, but a similar resolution. And we'll be glad to show it to you when we unveil it.
Senator McConnell, you continually criticize the Democrats' impeachment case, saying we don't have enough evidence here. Does that mean that you believe that it was appropriate for the president to ask a foreign leader to investigate a political rival?
You're asking me to comment on the issue that's going to soon be before us. I've addressed that type of thing on the floor over the weeks, and I really don't have anything to add to it. Yeah.
You make clear that you will be considering witnesses at some point mid-trial, but can you promise now that there will be votes on witnesses?
The way it works when you're in an impeachment trial, at the risk of being redundant, is that 51 senators determine what we do. And there will be, I'm sure, intense discussion once you get past phase 1 about the whole witness issue. Everything, and by the way, the people who will be calling the witnesses will not be necessarily us. It will be the prosecution or the defense. And that's the way it's done, and admittedly, this is not like a typical trial because every juror would be disqualified. All of us would be disqualified if this were a regular judicial proceeding. But who is called as witnesses, typically you would expect to come from the prosecution and from the defense. Thanks a lot.
Senator McConnell, when are you going to vote on USMCA?